So, ladies and gentlemen, would you please now welcome to the stage director Martin Scorsese. Followed by Robert De Niro and Al Pacino. And the producers, Jane Rosenthal and Emma Tillinger-Koskov. It's a long walk down. Thank you very much. And welcome. As Tricia said, what an amazing lineup to have here on this stage for this press conference. Just before I throw it open to the questions from the press, I wonder if, rather than go down asking you all individual questions, this is something that I'm sure everybody will have something to say about, which is, in some ways, we look at this lineup along here and we say, why did it take so long? You've known each other decades, and I know this project has been in your minds for a while, in one way or another. So give us a little bit of context as to how The Irishman comes together.
Well, it goes back to some special work that Bob and I were involved in for 20 some odd years. We were trying to get another project going based on, I don't know, our tenure in Hollywood, so to speak, in the 70s and the 80s. And that developed into something else, and we never quite settled on the project. And the last time we really worked together was in 1995, Casino. And so from that point on, we would always check with each other what we were doing, whether I could fit into his plans and vice versa. And ultimately, we did get involved. What was it, Bob? The Winter of Frankie Machine was the project?
Yeah. And
I mean, well, we weren't too enthusiastic about it, sorry. But we decided we had to do something. I think it was around 2010. No, 2008.
yeah.
2007.
2007, thank you. And so we decided it was enough time. We couldn't settle on something, so this is a project that we thought we would have some possibilities. I was really looking for something that with Bob to enrich more or less where we had gone in the 70s and the 80s and the early 90s. I mean, to just replicate what we had tried to do in the beginning of our careers wouldn't be anything, wouldn't be enriching in any way. And so you were about to direct The Good Shepherd, and Eric Roth was writing that, and Eric, knowing that we were trying to do something called Frankie Machine about a hitman who'd retired, Eric gave you a book called I Heard You Paint Houses by Charles Brandt for research.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about it. He said he just read it, and it had just come out, and I said, I got to read that book. And then when Marty and I were preparing, so that was about 2 years earlier than when Marty and I were committed to Frankie Machine, and Marty was starting to show me films like Jean
Gabin film like Touche pas au Grisby and Melville's Dulot and Le Deuxième Souffle and pictures like that, get a sense of the Gabin character, because by the time you were doing Casino, I felt that presence was similar.
And then I said, well, I have to read this book that I've been always wanting to read called I Heard You Paint Houses, and so I did read it just as research for the character, and then after I read it, I got together with Marty and I said, you got to look at this, and because I think this is what you're going to want to do. So that was it.
And well, Jane, you had the story about on the telephone with Brad Gray, right?
So we were ready to commit. Bob and Marty were ready to commit to making Winter Frankie Machine, and it was going to be financed by Paramount, Brad Gray, and we were all on a call together, and Brad was going to give us the green light. And in the middle of this conversation, Bob said, "Well, there's this other book that we're thinking about, and, you know, it could be research. Maybe we could combine these two movies. And Brad said, oh, so you're thinking, so you want to take a Go movie and turn it into a development project? And you kind of heard everybody go, mm-hmm. So anyway, that was 2007, and then we brought Steve Zalian on, and Steve delivered. Steve and Marty and Bob worked together, and we had optioned I Hear You Paint Houses. Frankie Machine went away, and Steve delivered a script in 2009.
9, yeah. I mean, the point is that we've been trying to find something that we felt right with. I don't know how you define right. You know, it's ambiguous and kind of we felt comfortable with in a way. It's something we couldn't articulate it. And once he described this character to me, I felt that he had a good sense of it. And I said, well, this is maybe where we could really try to explore and see what we could come up with. And it might really be of value ultimately for us as creative partners working together and getting Al involved, getting Joe Pesci involved, and the rest of the cast. And so we took a chance and got Steve Zalian. Zalian and I, you know, we pulled together a wonderful script, and then it took a number of years because why?
Well, Steve wrote the script, which was terrific, wonderful, as Marty says, and then it was a matter of getting everybody's schedules to line up. And Marty was doing Hugo. I remember coming over here, I don't know when you were doing Hugo, 8 years ago.
2009, 2010, I think, yeah.
And we were talking about that and how to, what we were going to do and his availability, and he wanted to do silence and so on. And then I had said to Marty I wanted to make sure he was okay if we would just let it out there when we talk on interviews. And usually I'm very superstitious about that because when you talk about it, it usually doesn't happen. But I thought maybe in this case, since we had no backers, no people really interested, the idea that we were doing it with Al and Joe, that I cleared it with Marty, and then I talked to Joe and then Al about they're okay, and he mentioning that they're on board. So we did that, and then we had a reading of the script. I don't know what year that was.
The reading of the script was right before January, right before you left to go do Silence. We had this one opportunity to get everyone together, and we taped a reading.
2012.
2012. I personally believe that was all we would have of The Irishman, because it was so difficult to get financing. And then when everybody heard it, there was a new energy, but Marty and Emma went off to shoot Silence, so we had another delay, a good one.
A good one.
So if I can bring Al Pacino in here. Jimmy Hoffa. So, I mean, what was your initial reaction to the idea of playing Jimmy Hoffa?
It's me you're talking to?
It is you, yeah.
Well, it was, because I've known Marty and Bob very long time, and so when Bob came to me, called me about it, and it sounded really interesting, and the opportunity to work with them was, it was very important to me. I really wanted to, for years we almost worked together, Marty and I, at different things, and of course Bob and I have worked together. I mean, we've known each other, since we were young actors. So we worked together, so it was a good thing.
Great.
I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, Hoffa.
The first meeting we had about this with you, Al, was, and we talked about it in a hotel in L.A.
Oh, that's right, the hotel, yes.
Yeah.
It's so coming back to me right now.
I know. Well, it's so long ago. But the thing was, after the discussion, we talked a little bit, and then he looked at us and he said, is this going to happen? Because the complications of schedules, and then, of course, no real enthusiasm, to say the least, about financing, really, it made it, something that is a nice dream, but we were pretty clear. As you said, Jane, that maybe the reading was going to be the only time you'd have heard it or seen it, you know. And we knew that going in, but somehow we pursued.
But I think that reading was very well orchestrated. I think Bob did it, arranged it so that I guess you would say the right kind of people were there to listen to it, and that was very affecting.
Yeah, they got excited by that. They still didn't give us the money.
Oh, see, I didn't know
But they
about
were
that
excited.
part.
There was actually nobody in the room that could really give us the money, but it was really good.
No, for good word of mouth. Yeah.
Good word.
Yeah,
Even Steve Zalian came in, and I remember it was you, Al, Bob, Bobby Cannavale, Paulie Herman,
Joe was there too.
Yeah.
Joe Pesci, Stephanie Kotzerba, who plays Bob's wife in the film. Yeah, it was kind of enjoyable reading.
You could feel it though in the room.
Yeah.
You know, you could feel that there was something. There was a live wire there. It had life to it. So I always thought that it would happen, but then there was a period I thought, no, I don't think so.
Well, yeah.
I get a call from time to time from Al, is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? I said, don't worry, just hold on. We're working on it.
Well, thank goodness it did, because the result is fantastic. Time for some questions from you. Oh, so many hands. Okay, lovely. Let's, where are those microphones? There's one there. Okay, can we get this straight away down here, please, first? And then if we can get another microphone over here as well, and then we'll go up to the back. Thanks. Okay, go.
Hello, Kat Andriaco from Free Cinema. I just saw the film. It was mind-blowing. It was one of those old epic things that make you lucky to be in a cinema and watching it. So thank you so much for all of you for that. The question is, this is obviously a Netflix production, and it's coming out very shortly after it has its run in the cinemas, and it seems like a good collaboration at the moment between TV or internet companies with films, with the film industry. And there are, of course, some people who are naysayers. So what would you think, will we need to, at some point, redefine, perhaps, what is cinema?
Well, now, okay, you're looking at me. Yeah, but I think we're redefining it now in such a way. I think it's not just an evolving of cinema, but it's a revolution. I mean, it's even bigger than the revolution that sound brought to cinema. It's the revolution of cinema itself back 120 years ago, 115 years ago. It's a new, and we say the new technology. We bring in things that are unimaginable, and how not only is it something extraordinarily good for narrative films, put it that way, narrative stories told with emphasized motion picture images, but it opens up a whole the original conception of what a film is and where it's to be seen has now changed so radically that we may have to say, okay, let's say there's a certain kind of film that's made here. There might be obviously virtual reality films. There's holograms. There's all sorts of things that are going to be coming that we don't really know. So in effect, one thing that will never, something that should always be protected as much as possible, and I think will always be there, is a communal experience. And I think that's best in a theater. Now, homes are becoming theaters too. But it's a major change, and I think one has to keep an open mind. You know, there's no doubt like seeing a film with an audience is really important. There is a problem though, in that you have to make the film, and we run out of room, in a sense. There was no room for us to make this picture. And for many different reasons, I guess. And ultimately, there was a financial issue, too, in terms of the CGI that we did. And the reason why we went for CGI is kind of complicated because at a certain point, if I made the film earlier, they could have played younger. And then at a certain point, we missed that. And then they said, well, use younger actors to play them younger. And I said, well, what's the point of that? And back and forth. And finally, the CGI, and we tried it and said, well, let's try. Let's see, let's experiment, open it up. I mean, CGI, to that extent, is really an evolution of makeup. Really. You know, you accept certain norms in makeup. You know that he's not that old, she's not that young, but you accept that as a norm. I mean, you accept the illusion, so to speak. Taking that and having the backing of a company that says, you know, you will have no interference. You'll make this picture as you want. The trade-off is it streams with theatrical distribution prior to that. I figured that's the chance we take on this particular project. You know, what streaming means and how that's going to define a new form of cinema, I'm not sure. I thought for a while maybe long-form TV is cinema. It's not. It simply isn't. You know, it's a different viewing experience. You could look at 3 episodes, 2, 4, 10. You know, one week, second episode the second week. That's not. It's a different kind of thing. So there's got to be still, what has to be protected is the singular experience of experiencing a picture, ideally with an audience, you know. But there's room for so many others now and so many other ways, and there's going to be crossovers completely. The value, how do you say, the value of a film that's like a theme park film, for example, the Marvel type pictures, where the theaters become amusement parks, that's a different experience. And it's not even, I was saying earlier, it's not cinema, it's something else. You know, whether you go for that or not, but it is something else, and we shouldn't be invaded by it. And so that's a big issue. That's a big issue. And we need the theater owners to step up for that, you see, to allow theaters to show films that are narrative films. A narrative film could be one long take for 3 hours, too, you know. It doesn't have to be everybody, it doesn't have to be a conventional beginning, middle, and end. But anyway, if that answers your question, I'm okay.
Great, thanks. Emma and Jane, anything you want to add to that as the people have to find the money to do this?
Oh.
You don't have to. It was only if you wanted to.
What was the question?
It was about really how whether cinema has reached a point where it's changing when you've got the option of having the streaming, well, as it were, in this case, the Netflix option.
What he said.
Right, great. Okay, good. Next question.
The one point to add to what Marty said is that it will be in theaters, and even when it goes on platform,
right.
it still will continue to be in theaters. So audiences have their choice of whether they're going to watch it in theater and have an amazing cinema community experience, or they want to watch it on a platform. Roma, for example, is still in theaters.
It's still in theaters somewhere in the world, yeah.
Around the world. So again, it's the audience has the choice of how they want to view something, and they're not mutually exclusive.
Thank you. Yes, next question.
In a sense, Mr. Scorsese leading on, Helen Barlow from Australia and covering for Portugal as well. Hi. Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in America that starred Mr. De Niro was a film perhaps more similar to this one. Do you think that there are any references to that film here, in that it's a long film and not as perhaps action-packed as your earlier gangster films? Because I think your earlier gangster films were very different to this.
In this underworld milieu, yeah, I mean, I guess the similarity is it's very long and Bob is in it. I mean, we love Leone, but there was no way that I was thinking I was doing Sergio. There's no way. I can't do that, you know. I just intuitively made the movie, and I told Bob, when we were trying to get raise the finance, I said, I know how to do this. I said, I haven't thought. I know how to follow it through, and I just went with that.
But how is it different to your earlier gangster films, though?
How does it relate to them?
Different.
Well, you know, back in 1973, we were 29, 30 years old. Now we're much older. And so we hope that maybe the vantage point of time, that something has evolved and maybe deepened to a certain extent about life, really. And if that could be conveyed in the story and the performances and the way the film is put together, and that would be some sort of advancement rather than just replicating what we had done in the past.
Thank you.
Hi guys, Thomas Cross here from FM 104 in Ireland, and I just want to say, what did it feel like looking at yourselves younger for the first time when you were looking back at the movie? Was it a bit crazy?
That's on you guys, not on me.
Well, considering everything is crazy,
Yeah.
it was crazy. I don't know quite what you mean, though. I'm sorry. What are you saying?
Like just with the new technology and all that, like this opens up everything that anyone can play, anyone or anything now. Does it open up a brand new world for everyone?
Well, I don't feel that way personally. I mean, but maybe it does for this is a technique that's early on. It's being formed. It's like what they have said. It's a form of makeup, and it could change things. And but I don't think you feel that way as an actor. I think you feel that as an actor, you're playing a role, and a role that more than likely, hopefully, you're suited for. And so when you do that, you're all bets are off, really. I mean, it doesn't matter. I know it doesn't matter what you look like. This is sort of true in a way, because I saw the film. Remember, you showed it to me, and they showed it to me without anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I just went with it, and I didn't think anymore that this was a story.
Right.
It was so. It handled in such a way. It was delivered in such a way, directorially, visually, costumes, everything, and also in the acting. And so I felt that was what was taking me up.
Mm-hmm.
A story. I wasn't thinking about anything else after a while. I mean, I didn't even think about it when it first started. Of course, it was me. I'm a little I wasn't thinking about the lines in our faces or anything. I just was accepting these people. They existed too. That's another thing. This was an interesting thing to try with, because it's a story about real things that happened, people who really lived, and I don't know, maybe that had something to do with it in my reaction to it. So this whole thing to me is innovative, of course, but at the same time, you tell a story, and in the end, that's what I'm a little bit more. I'm a little more concerned about that. And as I say, I did see the film without any work, or any, what do you call this stuff?
Effects.
The effects.
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 Okay. And it was fine. I, as a matter of fact, I'm not the only one who felt that way. There were other people who
I
had
know.
seen it
Right,
before
no.
it happened. I mean,
unless you're looking for it, right? Say, oh, there it is, and then.
I think it's really good that we have that in the film, that we have this potential, and it's exercised in the film, and it's stating what it's stating. In the old days, they put, some actor that we all knew and loved, and they'd put gray hair on him, and you'd say, oh, he got older. But you'd accept it, you'd accept it because it was makeup, and you went with it because it was in the story. I don't know what, I'm going too far here.
That's great.
I feel as though
We'll
I've
go to
dug
the
a
next
hole
question.
for myself
Thank you.
about something. I don't even know what.
Bob, do you want to answer
I'm
that?
sorry.
Do you want to say a little about when you saw yourself
I always joke that my career will be extended another 30 years. No, it's a whole interesting thing because where it will evolve, as far as, I was just thinking about copyrights and later and you and likeness and this and who gets it after we're all long gone, families and stuff like that. I mean, they even have that now in some ways with using famous actors from years ago in commercials who have create a certain whatever that they represent what that product is, whatever. So all that stuff. I don't know. I'm just happy we're at the beginning stages of it really being explored and God knows where it'll go.
Yeah.
And what excited me about it was that Pablo Hellman was doing this thing and wanted to make it state of the art, the best it could be to date, and that was an ambition for this movie, which was ambitious always, all the time. It fit the whole thing. Yeah.
See, it's also how we move, remember?
Oh,
Yeah, well, that
Big
too.
thing,
Yeah.
you know, how you move. These are the little things in there, you know, you're going along looking pretty, and then you go to get up, and
Yeah, I know.
it's like this. So someone would come
Yeah.
by us and just say, "Hey, man, what are you doing? You're 39 here."
It's true.
Okay, yes, go.
Hi, I'm Marcel from Geekpool, Germany, and my question goes to all three of you. What was the biggest challenge for each one of you on this movie? For you directing, for you playing your characters?
What was the biggest
Challenge.
challenge?
Yeah.
Making the movie is a big challenge, yeah, because, I mean, in terms of Bob and Al, you know, you guys, they're performing. Me, I can't speak for them, but for me, it's cutting through all the issues of how you perceive a story, the sweep of a story, what's essential to get and what isn't essential, and making those editing choices right there on set. First of all, even before shooting begins, to make those editing choices. Then in shooting, even tougher on those editing choices because it's a very complex picture, complex in terms of technology too. And staying close, or staying on point in a way, staying on the what's essential to the story, and those are the characters, particularly Frank's character, and eliminating everything else around that was getting in the way. And this, I think, was a 108-day shoot. So this is something, and then in the editing too. So it's wrangling the picture in a way. They call it wrangling, you know, and always threatening to run a little bit out of control, but grabbing it again, and using Frank Sheeran as the anchor for the whole picture until finally you wind up with him alone. And that's what it's all been about. I mean, that's just general about how you make a movie. Other ways, sometimes you make a movie, you don't know what you're going to do when you get there on the set. I tried that once, it didn't work. For me, it didn't work. And I usually like planning and fighting my way through the whole process, you know, until we get as best we can to the end result. You guys with the character.
Yeah, and certain things with like Marty, we would every so often I would come in to narrate pieces that Marty figured that we had to sort of what do you call
The
it?
voiceover.
Voiceover to give information or whatever, or sort of tightens whatever, and that's a normal part of making a movie. And this, you know.
Yeah, you even went into the audio tracks, the tracks of Frank Sheeran's actual voice,
Yes.
stories, and every now and then we go and we pick. You tell me
pick stuff
something. I say,
out.
oh yeah, it's interesting, and we'd fool around with that and try to find time to shoot it in the film. I'd give it to Emma and tell her, could you find some production time, please?
I'd say yes.
Yeah.
So was that your biggest challenge, Emma?
Helping Marty realize everything That was definitely.
We'll try, yeah, and also.
Because you
as a-
want them to, all of them to have the time specifically,
It's the time
the time
is the
to,
problem, yeah.
to create and the environment and the quiet, safe sort of space for them to do, and you don't want to rob them of that at all. So it's a challenge, but we had phenomenal partners, Netflix, the best, and we carved out that time and space, I hope.
Hello. Eloise from Strand Magazine. Congratulations on the film. It was fantastic. So I just wanted to ask you guys, why do you think that we are constantly pulled back into talking about films about pain and trauma? And as in The Irishman, there's a lot on macro level with the president's assassination, etc. But it really does go into personal, individual pain. And I was just wondering, why do you think that is?
Why do you think pain is important
Is
to
important,
storytelling?
exactly. Yes.
Essence of
Pain, suffering, that idea, what makes an interesting story? I mean, what do you think, guys?
Well, I mean, this was a simple story. It was about a guy who was caught between two people who were powerful people, and one of them was disappeared. We never knew what happened to him, really, to this day. The other one was also the Joe Gallo, referring to him. You still don't know who did that to him. It had that to hang on in some ways, this political, this grand story with these historical, if you want, type characters, and a simple story.
And also, Bob, in terms of that, when you're talking about these guys, and then on the other level, you have JFK, Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King. You've got all this going on, and nobody knows really what happened there. And I always say, would it make any difference now if we knew exactly who, when, how, and where? No. It's the dark forces that take over that are always present. And these guys are right in the middle of it, in a way. They just walk by the TV, and there's missiles coming from Cuba. You know, so, and that's your afternoon lunch. You know, so yeah, I mean, that when you say the simple story, that was the thing, to hold on to the simplicity of it, because the rest is so complicated.
Go ahead. Yeah. Okay.
Hi, my name's Stephen Pape. I was just wondering, I mean, this film, for me, in many ways, is about, like, reflection. I was wondering, with your kind of amazing careers, that's kind of ingrained into the kind of fabric of sort of cinema, do you guys ever sort of sit back and reflect, or do you always look towards the next project? And also, I was just wondering... That's fine. Sorry. I'm fine. I can't remember part two.
What happened? We're hanging on. You're just wondering what?
Okay.
It's the second part of the question.
All right.
That was the good part.
So I got quite nervous. You guys are legends. All right, so the second part was, do you think you only could have made this film now because you've lived kind of fuller lives, that you're now in a position where you can kind of, you're in a position, better placed to sort of understand the texture of this narrative?
You mean that we could have made this film earlier, would have been different? Well, yeah. I think, absolutely. I mean, it's like, I think it isn't, I don't think we all got together and said, let's make a movie and reflect. You know? We're all sitting in the trailer like, this is like suddenly, as I say, it's intuitive, you know? And I think, well, Bob, Al, you know.
It was a movie that evolved. It would have, I mean, could it have been done earlier? Yes. But the story came out at a certain point. The book came out. That took so many years to evolve. We actually had problems getting the rights to the story. There was a lot of confusion there, too, that took a bit of time. And everything, and when you always see these movies, that especially in the old days, they'd have 15 years in the making, finally on the screen. This is what it's all about. That's
really
what it is.
scheduling,
You know.
and legal and
Everything, legal, schedule, actors, availability, director, everybody, the whole thing. It's, but we're just happy that we were able to make it. And I had a great time. I would have shot for another 5-6 months with Marty. If I could.
Well, sadly, time is actually the question here. I'm really sorry to those of you who've not managed to ask a question, but I want to thank you for the questions there were, and particularly to thank our panel for their magnificent and moving film. So,
thank you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey You Guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yeah.
Nice.
Hey You Guys!